If you have seen my entry to the Chorus 2K Interim Blitz competition, you have probably noticed that I employed a multi-pass launch for my coaster, even though this element is simply not included in Planet Coaster itself. So, let me show you how I created this. This is the map I built my actual coaster in, and let's see how it looks from the outside without any edits. As you can see, the coaster actually doesn't do the element properly and instead just spins around in one edge, and it's also going to spin around in the other one too. So let's see how I actually made it appear to work properly. As you might have noticed, there appears to be another track inside the multipass launch section. In fact, there's two. The first one is used for the initial forwards launch and the second is used for the backwards launch. As you can see, the coaster is propelled onto the launch section with an invisible track. This comes courtesy of the No Tracks Limit V3 mod for Planet Coaster, link in the description. However, the first method is actually possible on console. You can see that the coaster just stalls out on the top hat and eventually gets stuck on the launch track. The backwards launch coaster gets propelled onto the multipass section with a reverse launch element, which is the only invisible element for the coaster. So, it will have to fall back into the station and then get launched into the spike again. Then it stops on the top hat with another reverse launch element, which then propels it backwards into the spike. Just ignore the RMC T-Rex trick, I just used it to get a catwalk in and let one of the pieces remain to quickly gain access to the invisible part because you can't select it. Obviously the coaster is just going to crash after it completes the backwards section, but that's no issue because we can simply edit it together to look like one smooth motion. So, let's move on to the actual tutorial. For the first method, you start to build the coaster and when getting to the triple launch section, you select angle snapping and remember the length of the track sections. You want to accelerate the coaster to its final speed, and if the g-forces are too high, then just simply extend the track pieces after the launch. Now, you want to have the last piece the same length, and then delete the first section and build a section twice the length from the original track to connect to the other section, even though they are facing opposite directions. If you then have trouble selecting the next track piece, simply build another section going backwards from the floating piece. You then want to change the launch into the speed you actually want for your first pass and try to get the train to do this turnaround motion in a slow manner. Now after that's done, you want to retrack the multipass launch section, as you may have seen from the BBP Games tutorial. However, you don't want to exactly retrack the track, so instead you want to turn angle snap off and build the track a few degrees off from the first pass. If you don't do this, the coaster may reconnect the launch track in weird sections, and if you reload the game, the multipass section won't work. So then just build a spike in the back and retrace it again, and in the end you're just going to do your third launch, and from then on you can just complete the top hat or whatever you want to launch the train into. I just recommend doing it without any banking because you won't be able to smooth it without kind of ruining the looks of your ride. I recommend changing one of the pieces from the third launch to an alternative track style because it will then be easier to select the second track because you can't move the selection into this because it's connected with two 180-degree twists. Then to make this look nice you want to add two more coasters, and for this you pretty much need the No Track Limits V3 mod. So you're going to build two coasters, the Vector coaster for the backwards launch and the interdimensional coaster for the forwards launch. You do this because the Vector coaster has access to a reverse launch section that is invisible, and the interdimensional coaster doesn't have access to launch sections normally, so those will be invisible as well. So you simply retrace the coaster with your selected model, and then you obviously don't add the 180-degree twists and instead just let it stall out and get stuck. For the reverse launch, you first of all want to add a reverse launch section which is invisible going into the spike, which you then align with the actual track, and then you're going to build a launch section behind the coaster to launch it back up again, and then you're just simply going to do the same thing and retract the section, ending in another reverse launch section, which you do basically shortly before going into the actual launch. You might need to play around with it a bit so the speeds of the forwards and backwards launch line up, because you're going to need to cut from one to the other. You then just want to build some track at the spike, and for the switch track you can just simply use the actual coaster, lead the track section, and then build from there. Just don't connect it to the actual coaster. For your POV, you then want to cut at some sections where the coasters go at a similar speed. For the first one, I would recommend doing it at the end of the launch track, cutting to the forward launch. Then, before the forward launch hits the back section again and gets stuck, you want to cut away to the backwards launch, which you can easily identify by the sound. And then afterwards, the backwards launch you just want to cut again once it hits the forwards launch. So then back to the original coaster, and then just going from there. To give it a little bit more realism, you might want to actually change the switch track, and for that you just simply delete the track sections for the coaster and then just re-add them with Control Y or whatever the button is on console after you're done. I want to have the coaster on the track when you delete the curve into the section, and then just retrace it. Don't have to line up properly because you can't really see it, but it's always nice to give it the extra little effort. But this is just a tutorial, so I won't be that precise. Alright, this has been my tutorial on the multipass launch. If you still have any questions, just ask them in the comments. Maybe I can do a little smaller tutorials on the simple steps required for this. Anyways, my name is Kai, have a nice day, goodbye.